Cool. All right, so welcome to the NewbQuest podcast. This is a podcast where we speak with indie game developers and folks interested in the art and science of making games, with an aim to helping out people who are newer to the field and trying to learn and get a leg up. And hopefully there will be some stuff of value to people who are more experienced as well. And so tonight we have with us Noel Berry, who is a indie developer based out of Vancouver, Canada. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I became aware of you, I guess, through your collaboration with Alec Holowka. And then saw some of the updates that you've been posting about your project, Skytorn, which is in development. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that, and maybe you could just kind of tell the people who haven't seen anything a little bit about the game.
Cool, yeah. So Skytorn is a game I'm working on with a few other people. So I'm working on it with, Alec Holowka, like you said. He's doing the music and some design and programming stuff. And then I'm also working on it with Pedro Medeiros, and he's or Saint 11, and he's doing the art for it. And then Matt Thorson is also helping with some design stuff. And then I'm programming it and doing a lot of design as well. And I guess it's like a procedurally generated platformer on a floating island, and you kind of see how long you can survive as things come out of the darkness and attack you. So there's definitely so yeah, there's lots of different inspirations like Spelunky. Don't Starve, Zelda, things like that. Definitely probably a bit of Minecraft in there too.
Nice.
Just given the procedural generation and things like that. Yeah, so that's kind of the general idea of the game.
Cool. And so, so with the survival, is there a survival mechanic beyond sort of being attacked, or is it more kind of like avoiding getting killed by enemies?
We're still like kind of designing that part and figuring that out, but we're thinking there's going to be some kind of hunger system, and you'll have to find resources in order to fix that and keep going. So yeah, there will be some kind of hunger system built into the health system. So we have like, I think your health will just kind of drain through the day, and you have to like fight other enemies to get food and things like that to keep your health up, and then also enemies damage your health, which are is also bad. So yeah, a bit of a combination between resource management and finding things, and also like creatures coming out and attacking you.
Awesome. Well, I love one of the things that that really captivated me about it, just on seeing the stuff that you posted, is the visual aesthetic. Saint 11 is doing some awesome artwork there, and just the kind of caviness of it. Those little tunnels and that kind of intricate, naturalistic, caviness is not a word.
Yeah.
But that kind of naturalistic environmental feel, just instantly kind of, I'm like, oh yes, I want to crawl in there.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's done a really good job with the art. He's really awesome at pixel art, and he's really able to like just kind of run with an idea and just make awesome stuff for it. So you just kind of like, hey, let's make this awesome thing, and he's like, okay, I'm down. And he just kind of comes up with his own ideas and starts just making his own art. It's just, awesome. It fits the game really well. So he's good at just kind of figuring out what kind of style of art fits the game and just kind of running with it. So he's really good at kind of just figuring out what to work on next and how to make everything fit together.
No, that's amazing. That's such a great trait in a collaborator. That's really, really cool. And so, so you're doing a kind of a procedural generation thing. Is it sort of one big level? Is it multiple small levels? How are you kind of approaching that aspect of things?
At this point, it's one big level. So you land on a single island, and it's pretty big. There's a set size to it, and you can explore that. As we progress through the game, as we work on it, we're thinking of more things we can add to it to kind of make progression more interesting. So we're going to have some dungeons and stuff you can find in the island, but they'll still be in the main map. They won't be like, you won't go through a door and come out somewhere else. They'll be
right.
embedded in the island and part of the world.
That's cool.
Originally, when we first started making the game, we thought that you could jump off islands and it would just generate a new one for you to land on it.
Mm.
But the more we work on it, the more we're just kind of focusing on one island and making that like a really strong experience and just making that big enough and interesting enough to explore for a long time. I guess we might still play with the idea of having other places to explore later, but for now we're just focusing on like having a singular island per playthrough.
Interesting, yeah, and then obviously because it's procedural, you could sort of restart and have a new
Yeah.
island. Are you doing a like a permadeath like thing? Is it like kind of a rogue influence?
Yeah, originally we weren't going to do it, but the more we work on it, the more it kind of makes sense to do that. So the latest sort of stuff we've been working on has been in the direction of permadeath. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the procedural stuff, it 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 raises the stakes, and then because you kind of have this world and then you lose it,
Yeah.
which is an interesting feeling, and then obviously, but there's that fresh, like, oh, and then there's a new one, and what's in this one, so it's a
Yeah, and
cool.
and when we were toying with like making it really based on survival, that just made permadeath way more just made more sense because if it's about survival and you die, it wouldn't make much sense if you just restart with all your stuff at the same place or something or some other workaround. It just seemed to make more sense to just have it like a cut off and then a fresh start again or whatever. There'll be some things I think that go through each playthrough or like
Mm.
you keep or yeah continue progression through multiple playthroughs, but the actual player and the island and stuff like that will restart on death. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting mechanic that I've been seeing people kind of incorporate more in the kind of this procedural format or roguelike format or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it, which I think is cool because it's definitely it can feel a little static when it's just like, oh, I lost everything again.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
it's cool when there's some idea of progression, and something new either is unlocked or just. I mean, the other, I guess, argument you could make is that you learn, and then like Spelunky, right? You learn,
Yeah,
and that's how you get further, not through any kind of like artificial mechanics. So, I don't know. It's an
yeah,
interesting area.
it definitely is. I think it's a lot of fun to have a bit of progression, just so that the player feels like they're not, even if they got really far and then they die, it's not like, well, we're back to the very beginning again. It still has, like they could, new island and new beginning and stuff, but they still have other things to kind of like, oh, look, I found these things. I have this. We're not even sure what it would be yet, but
Sure.
just like, oh, we have these things now that, show the progression and like make the beginning not just the same start again and again and again. But
Yeah. I like that as a mechanic. I think it's a cool layer on that kind of format. And so, how far in are you guys? How long have you been working on the project?
we're pretty early at this point. I think our first commit, like our first version, like that we pushed onto a repo or whatever, it was like 3 months ago.
Okay.
So we really only started it 3 months ago, and I wasn't full time on it, or no one is really full time on it still, but I wasn't full time on it until maybe last month. So it's kind of been on again, off again for 3 months, but the last month I've been kind of steadily working on it. So it's pretty early. We don't have a ton yet, but it's slowly coming together.
That's cool. Well, the stuff I've seen definitely, it's definitely piqued my interest, and there's an atmosphere that I think you guys have created already that you can kind of see a vibe to it that definitely looks cool. Like I saw you posting some like swarms of insects and stuff, and it was interesting to see those going through
Yeah,
going through the iterations of having green squares and then
yeah,
some art in there, and it's super fun to watch. I mean, that's an interesting thing to talk about. I mean, so you guys are obviously taking a super open development, public
yeah.
approach. What kind of led you to go that way?
I think maybe the main thing is that I just like being open about what I'm working on. I really like sharing it. I have a really hard time of working on something and being really excited about it and not posting it on Twitter or not sharing it with people. Like I just have a hard time not doing it in the first place. So I think with most of the games I've ever made, I'm reasonably public about them, where I post screenshots very often and things like that. So I just like doing it that way more. I like getting other people involved and getting feedback as I work on it. It just seems like more of a interesting experience for me to develop it even. And I think, especially for this kind of game where it's procedurally generated and there's just things like you can see the progression really well. You can see what's being worked on, and it doesn't really spoil anything.
Yeah.
A game like, for example, like Alec and Scott's Night in the Woods, which is a very story-driven game, you can't share as much of that because if you share it, then you ruin it. Um, it also just happens to work with this kind of game. Yeah, I think those are.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, that's a real challenge, I think, for people working in a more story-driven format. Is like this approach, I think, is sort of almost impossible. I mean, I guess there's
Yeah,
stuff that you can show, and they've been showing some cool stuff, but they can't like stream the development or whatever like
yeah,
Vlambeer have been doing
yeah.
with Nuclear Throne, which has been interesting to watch. Um, and so what tools are you using on the project?
So right now, the game is being made in Mono Game, so that's C Sharp or Mono, and then Mono Game. And Mono Game is a port of XNA, and then Mono is a port of C Sharp. So we're using that for the actual game, and then I think Pedro uses like graphic scale and Photoshop and things like that for the art. And then we have a few other small tools and stuff that we use for various things.
Yeah. And so what led you to Monogame as opposed to, some of the other tools that are around?
Well, for this game, like we knew it was going to be pixel art. I think pretty early on. So that made I guess other options would have been Unity, for example, and Unity
Right.
is really awesome. But I guess I just felt like for pixel art, it wasn't necessarily the best option, just because you can't always get it to work quite as nicely as you want with pixel art. Also,
Sure.
I just have more experience with monogame, so when I was going to be the person who's doing most of the programming, I was like, well, I'd rather work in whatever I'm most comfortable with. And also, Matt made Towerfall in monogame.
Oh, really?
So
I
it
didn't
was
know
just kind
that.
of like, so if he wanted to give input or things like that, I could ask him for help.
Of course. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that Towerfall was in Monogame. That's interesting to learn. And so I don't know too much about it, but can you deploy to multiple platforms with Monogame, or is
Um,
it what's
yeah,
the sort of
monogame like runs on Windows and Mac Linux. I believe there's like also iOS and Windows 7 phone and things like that. And then they're working on, I think they announced a PS4 thing
Oh, cool.
a month or two ago as well. But uh, yeah, so it can deploy to multiple different things. It definitely takes a bit of work. It's not just like an instant click of a button, but it's
Right.
pretty good, and it's functional, so that's good. We definitely want to make sure when we're working on this thing that it can get ported to other things relatively easily.
Yeah, that definitely seems relevant. And have you guys considered kind of like where you would like it to go platform-wise, or is it kind of early for that?
It's pretty early for that. I mean, we've talking a bit. I know for sure, like Windows, Mac, and Linux will eventually.
Right.
Like, we would definitely want all those. Past that, can't really say yet. We don't really
Right.
know for
Right.
sure, and we haven't figured it out completely yet. But
That's cool. Yeah. And I guess you would probably go, as like a paid download type of model, right?
probably yeah, something like Steam and things like that. Probably.
Yeah, I mean that's the something I kind of wanted to ask you about as well, kind of coming from the perspective of, you know, looking as someone kind of very new to the kind of indie game world. I know that you came through the Flash
Yeah.
scene and did a lot of good work there. And I was kind of wondering kind of what your take on that is today, if that is still kind of as vibrant as it was, or if that's still a sort of an interesting way for people to kind of cut their teeth.
Right. I think it's definitely slowed down a lot in the last few years, but I think making Flash games is still super, super awesome, and it can still be viable. There's definitely not as many people making Flash games commercially like there were a few years ago, but there's still awesome stuff made in it all the time. There's lots of cool websites and things, and I think it'll still be, it's not going to be dead as a thing to make stuff in for a long time. Like you can still make cool Flash games for a long time, and it's great because it is like I assume for the next few years it'll still be everyone will be able to play it. Like if you make a Flash
Right.
game, everyone's going to be able to play it, whether they're on Windows or Mac or Linux or whatever. So that is really appealing, especially if you want to make kind of smaller, quick games.
Yeah.
And for learning, it's still great. Like AS3 is a great language to kind of get started with. It's not too crazy, and it has a lot of strengths. But I think over time it will continue to sort of slow down and die out. But for the next few years, I think it's a great place to get started or learn.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes to my next thing. Would that be if somebody kind of came to you and said, "Hey, I really want to make games. Like, I want to learn a tool or a platform." Would that be where you would direct people, or would you maybe send them
Yeah, it would be
else?
one of the directions. I think it's a very viable option. I would also point towards Unity because that's also really awesome.
Yeah.
And very, it has a strong community. And then for some people, GameMaker is really awesome still. Like, there's a lot of really cool people making GameMaker games as well.
Yeah, I've kind of been impressed by the stuff that I've learned, people have made in GameMaker. I mean, you did some stuff in that early on, right?
Yeah, I got started making games in GameMaker. That's pretty much where I started with. I mean, I worked in that for 4 years or 5 years or something. So I spent a lot of time with GameMaker, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it was a really great place to start. It really helped me get a good understanding of programming, and the language is pretty simple and easy to understand, so it was a good place for that. And then the stuff that comes out of GameMaker is awesome. Like, there's a lot of really cool games, Hotline Miami and all of Lambier's stuff. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is really, I was kind of impressed to learn that was the tool that they were using. Is it a proprietary language that they use?
Yeah, GameMaker has its own scripting language called GML,
Okay.
and that gets converted to whatever GameMaker itself runs in. It's just like an interpreted language.
Cool. Yeah, that definitely seems like I get the sense that, I mean, I know that now Unity has moved to offer kind of 2D support, but I kind of get the sense that for if you're starting with 2D stuff and kind of looking for something as a starting point, it might be a good place.
If you've never programmed before and you haven't done a lot of game making stuff at all before, then I think GameMaker is a really, really good starting point. It's really easy to understand. It's pretty straightforward. With Unity, you still have to understand a bit of 3D stuff, get meshes and sprites and stuff in there, and it's a bit harder than GameMaker. And the languages aren't quite as easy. Like, C# is not as easy a language as GameMaker is, but also
Sure.
C# is way more powerful. But
Right.
it just depends on kind of where your background is. I guess Unity also has like JavaScript, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think if you're starting out, GameMaker is probably easier, especially if you're trying to do 2D stuff.
Yeah. That seems to make sense. And so then, kind of shifting away from tools, one of the kind of pieces of advice that is like, I forget, I was watching some video about like advice to new game designers, and literally like every single person was like, scope. Don't make it too big. Like, scope,
Yeah.
scope, scope, scope. Like, it was like 20 people saying like one word, and they were just like, scope. Don't make it, which is funny, and definitely is obviously like super solid advice. But the thing that that I kind of wonder about is like, if you don't know anything, how can you tell what is
Right.
too big of a scope? Everybody's like, yeah, just take what you think and double it. And I'm sure if you've never done anything, it's like take it and make it 6 or 8 times longer. I don't know if you have any kind of advice in that direction to people. Kind of.
I think I kind of agree. Like, to understand how big of a scope something is, you have to try making stuff a few times at least. But I think I'd still try to start small, based on, I don't know, whatever you think is small, I guess. But yeah, I would still suggest trying to start small. I know it's kind of hard to judge what is small when you've never made a game before, but I mean, if you try making something a few times, you'll kind of get an idea of like what's too big of a scope and what's too small of a scope, and kind of where a good place is to sort of try to finish a game. I think when you're starting out, it is really important to aim to finish something, not just kind of make little things and never finish anything, because it's a really good experience and really good for learning to actually finish something from start to finish. So if you start a few projects and they don't really finish and you can't, they're too big or whatever, then just keep kind of pulling the scope down until you got into a point where like, hey, I finished this game, even if it took you like 2 weeks or something, or 2 days or whatever, and it's really tiny and it takes 3 minutes to play. That's awesome, because you made a game from start to finish, and that's I think that's really good. And then you can say, hey, I have a finished game. Like that's
Yeah,
really a really cool thing to have. Um,
definitely.
so I think, yeah.
And then, so speaking of 2 days, I mean, I know you've done a lot of game jam stuff, and the thing that I have, it's something I've personally never done. I've been, trying to learn game development for a long time, but kind of like it's been like a year or less than a year now for the kind of latest push where I've actually done more stuff, and I feel scared to go to a game jam.
I don't know. I don't think game jams should be something you should be too scared of. I mean, obviously, I could see them, yeah, definitely a little bit intimidating if you haven't made a lot of games before. But all the game jams I've been to have been very welcoming. They've had people there who have never made a game before to people who have made dozens of games before, and everyone's kind of willing to help each other out. So if you need help or are a pretty novice at making games in general, there's lots of people there who are willing to help. So it's a good experience. Just to go and see other people working and stuff, and also a really good learning experience because you have other people who are maybe a lot better. You are a lot better at certain aspects of games, maybe not in general, but yeah, there's certain things they're better at that they can help you with. So I think they're a really good learning experience. And I mean, there's also online jams you can participate in where you don't have to go in person, and then maybe if you aren't feeling it or whatever, you can stop halfway through and
Right. It's less sort of social pressure. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, and you have participated in some of those, right? Like did you do Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare or however that's pronounced?
Yeah, I did Ludum. I'm not sure, but yeah, I did Ludum Dare. I've done it a few times. I think I've done it 3 times. I want to do more. The last one I entered was almost a year ago, or 2 years ago. But yeah, Ludum Dare is really, really awesome. That's a really good experience. And it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a try the next time around. I wanted to do the last one, but I just had crazy life stuff going on and couldn't put aside 48 hours. But it does seem like a super fun and exciting process.
Yeah, I think Ludum Dare is a really great community, and they have it's a really fun experience and a really good process. And it's really cool to try to set down 48 hours and be like, I'm going to make something in this time, and do it. Like it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like that. I mean, and that was an interesting thing. I watched. I think it was an interview with Indie Static with you, and you were talking about how doing commercial projects kind of gave you, by having to deliver milestones and deadlines and stuff, that was kind of helpful for finishing. I think you were talking about. I think it was after you had done Prism.
Prism Panic. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was cool. Actually, I was just playing that today. It was a cool mechanic. The dimension thing was very cool. Yeah, I was checking out, some of your stuff before. It was interesting. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that I guess that's something I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, is just kind of, obviously finishing is the goal, and it's like, how do you do that? Or just how do you stay motivated? Obviously, I mean, I guess your advice of doing 2-day games, it's not that hard to stay motivated for 2 days, right? But then when you kind of start to get into longer things, it's hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. And I mean, I haven't been that good at doing that in the long run. I start a lot of projects and I work on them for a few weeks or a few months, and then I stop and move on to something else. I think most games that I work on, they last an average of 3 or 4 months, like games that are longer than a few days at least. They last 3 or 4 months, and that seems to be a point at which I'm that's when I get bored and I don't want to work on this anymore. I want to look at this. I want to do other things now. And, so I'm not necessarily good at keeping on long-term projects, but the more I work on games and the more games I finish, the longer that time seems to be going. It started off when I was very into making games, I couldn't spend more than 2 weeks or maybe a week at a time. And then the older I get and the more time I spend making games and the more games I finish, it seems to just slowly be increasing, and I learn maybe what kind of games I really like spending time on, and just kind of slowly figuring that out. But it's definitely definitely hard to keep motivated for a long time on one project, which is why I think when you're starting, it's probably best to just kind of make things that you could think you like, make things you think you could finish in, less than a month or 2 months or something, and then
Yeah.
slowly increase that time. Yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. And then so, I mean, you've done quite a bit of collaborating with other people, both sort of online and off. Um, do you find that? Do you think that's useful for people who are kind of starting out?
I guess it depends on what you feel like doing. Like if you are solely interested in doing art for games, then it would probably be a good idea to find a programmer, or
Right.
someone who likes programming and not doing art or something like that. Um, like I don't like doing music. I'm just really bad at it, and I don't think I'll ever have or ever take the time to really learn how to be good at it and stuff like that. So I always like collaborating with a musician because it's just like not where my skills are. I'm just not a very talented musician. So
Sure.
so I like collaborating with musicians all the time because then they can do the stuff that I don't like or I'm not very good at. So if you have certain things that you don't like about game development or have certain things that you don't feel you're very strong at, finding collaborators who kind of love that stuff and are really good at that, I think that's a really good thing. And then you can also kind of learn a bit and see how they do things as well because they're working on something that you're not very good at. You can kind of see and improve how you could do that too, and vice versa. They can learn things from you. So I think collaborators can be good. I think if you're just starting, especially if you're like a programmer, you can kind of just make things on your own for a bit and learn things. But collaboration is definitely really awesome, and it's a good experience. And I think you can make games if it basically comes down to what you feel like. I think
Yeah.
I think it's a good learning experience to collaborate with someone because they have other skills that you're maybe not good at, so it's just good to learn from them. But I mean, making games on your own is fine too. It just kind of depends on what you feel like, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, because you do some drawing and some art and programming, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
kind of as a minimum, you could at least make a game with no sound on your own.
yeah. And I've done that. I've done that quite a bit. My Ludum Dare games are always just my own art and my own programming, and then they're soundless because I can't get a sound that I like on my own.
Right.
But um, but yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's something that people seem to get stuck on a lot is the I mean, I think I'm with you in that I see a lot of value initially in doing things on your own. Like I've been working on a project on my own and I'm not, a great artist, but I've scraped together some things that can kind of represent the things that I want, and
Mhm.
that's been useful for me to think about that and to, try to open up Photoshop and make some stuff at least so that I kind of have an idea about it. I definitely see people kind of getting stuck on that, being like, oh, well, I don't have an artist or I don't have a programmer and I can't do
Yeah,
anything.
I think in that case, like if you're, yeah, just to do it anyways, kind of, just start learning it anyways. If you just want to make a game, you can probably do it on your own. I think even if you're not a great programmer, but you can still kind of hack together something in GameMaker or something. Or if you're not a great
Yeah.
artist, you can still kind of put things together. Like the only reason I can do okay art, I'm by no means a very good artist, but I can do okay art, is because when I was making games in GameMaker and Flash, um, I needed art and I didn't know who
Yeah.
to ask, and I was like, well, if I need art, I should just start doing it, and I slowly pixeled away at things until I over years slowly started getting better at it. So it's just like you'll never be a good artist if you don't just start
if you
experimenting and
don't if
trying.
you don't do it. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good attitude. I mean, that's definitely something that I see, so I've been sort of reaching out to some different people to collaborate through different forums, like places like
Mm-hmm.
TigSource, and I definitely you see people who are just kind of like there's a kind of a weird helplessness that it's just like, come on, dude, just like you could make some art that looks bad, like I
Yeah,
don't know. It's interesting. It's a thing that I see people kind of stick on that I, anyway.
yeah.
Um,
I think the lack of assets shouldn't stop you from making your project. Like even if you're not a good artist, and you're not going to be happy with your art, you can still make a really cool game with your okay-ish art. And then if later down the road you're like, okay, this game is really awesome, now I'm really happy with this, and I really don't like this art still, then maybe then you can find a collaborator or something, or someone who's also excited about your project who wants to do art. But I don't think feeling like you're not I don't think lack of assets or your lack of skill in a specific area should stop you from making the project you want to make. Like, you should keep trying at it anyways, and by the end of it you'll probably just have something that's pretty cool, because you actually spent the time on working on it and progressing with it and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember seeing some of the like programmer art version of Braid. I don't know if you ever saw those screenshots.
I have seen
like,
those.
you know, it's really basic kind of programmer art, but it's like, yeah, he used that to kind of prototype or develop a concept that turned out to be incredible, you know, and then once he had that, he kind of stuck some awesome art on it, you know, and made an awesome game. So that was, when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, good. It should look terrible too. Like,
yeah, I think it's really okay to have, especially when you're just kind of prototyping things and figuring out the game. Like, you don't need the perfect art yet. You can kind of, or perfect anything. You can just kind of be like, I'm just gonna make this thing, and even though I'm bad at these certain aspects of making it, I'm just gonna do it anyways. And that's just how you get better. And yeah, no, that's totally cool. And then you know, in terms of kind of meeting people to collaborate, I guess for those who don't find a lot of people in their local area, what would you recommend, I guess, online? I think just, you know, participating in forums and things like TigSource. I think I personally find Twitter as a really good resource. It just has a lot of, I just, you know, follow people who I find interesting, and they'll retweet other people who are also awesome at things, and just it's an interesting community of artists and programmers and game developers and musicians and things like that. So I find that to be a really good resource. I think looking for game jams, like Ludum Dare, things like that. The Ludum Dare jam, not the compo, but the jam, is like 3 days long, and that allows collaborations. So you can probably find people through there, or other people you like, you know, think are doing cool stuff, and can collaborate with them or something.
Definitely.
Things like that, I think, are really good resources. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else would be really good, but those things at least for sure. I think jams are probably a good place as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Online jams.
No, I think those are great recommendations, and Twitter is really cool, and especially because you know, I've been on Twitter for a long time with my music stuff that I do, but I found that the sort of indie game people, or just game dev people on Twitter, it's just a very friendly and sort of it's a nice community.
Yeah,
I was kind of surprised. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's
From my experience, it's been pretty open, and people are really willing to, you know, talk about their stuff and talk about your stuff, or you know, share their comments on things. And it's a really quick and easy way to kind of talk directly to someone, even though the short conversations, obviously, given the 140 characters, you can still find links to what they're working on, or you know, short conversations, and good way to at least meet people or see what they're up to, and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I've had that experience. And also, you know, TigSource has been really cool. I've definitely met some very interesting people doing cool projects on there. And I found that, you know, just putting stuff up, you know, they have their like little devlog threads, and just like putting stuff up there, and just having like, I remember at first I like had my thing, and I was like working on it for months, and I was like, oh, I don't want to put it up there, you know, like I'm like, oh, you know, I just feel weird, but I kind of broke the ice and put it up there, and just like one or two people were like, hey, cool, man, this looks cool, and I was like, oh, you know, like I felt all happy, you know, and that's actually, I feel like for me been like really valuable, just getting that little bit of feedback and encouragement from people to just be like, hey, you're not crazy. This is not like just some crazy bullshit that you're working on in your room.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah, I think sharing your work is really important, and getting feedback on it. And I mean, there's always going to be people who are kind of like, this isn't good, or you need to work on this harder, or whatever. And there's always going to be that. But there's also you know, most people are really really positive, and they know that you're working on something and can see the work you put into it and are excited by that. So I think it's almost always really beneficial to share your stuff for sure. Like, it's just a good, I don't know, yeah, it's a good feeling to have people comment on it and give feedback and stuff, and it helps motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it to be super motivating. Just getting that little bit of like encouragement, especially if I've kind of like hit a tough spot in the
Mhm.
project. It's like it's got some problem and I'm stuck and it's broken, and just having somebody be like, hey, some random person be like, this is cool, man. You should keep doing this. I'm like, oh, okay, like kind
Yeah.
of gives me
Yeah.
that little outside kind of validation to kind of stay motivated and focused. Um, cool. And then, do you live in the indie house in Vancouver?
Yeah, that's our title for our house that we live in.
It's
Yeah,
such a
so
funny idea.
yeah, it's basically it's five of us that live in this house. So it's me, Matt Thorson, Chevy Ray, Alec Holowka, and Hannah Boyd, and we all live in this house, and most of us make games and collaborate on things and stuff like that. And then we titled it Indie House because why not? Might as
Yeah,
well.
oh, it's great. It's a great idea, and it sounds super fun. I mean, it's awesome the idea that you have your collaborators all physically there, and you can kind of
Hmm.
quickly work together and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Even if we're not collaborating on things, it's just good to be able to sit around in an environment with other people who are doing the same thing as you, and just it helps motivation. You can get feedback on things. You can just talk about programmery or artist or thing, whatever you feel like related to game development all the time, without people kind of being confused or not know what you like. Everyone knows what you're talking about all the time because they're doing the same thing, sort of.
Yeah, totally.
So it's a really good environment. It's kind of like a co-working space, I guess. Just
Mm. Co-living.
yeah, I guess.
That's cool. Yeah, no, that's. I had somebody else. I'm based here in New York City, and I had somebody recommend co-working spaces. They were like there was like a big cafe they were going to with a bunch of other game developers for that kind of same reason, just to kind
Mhm.
of be around some people because it definitely can be a weird, solitary thing to
Yeah.
do for hours and hours.
Yeah, it definitely can. We do a fair amount of going to a cafe with a bunch of other people and working on stuff for a few hours. That's really good too. We do a fair amount of that as well. Yeah, I think that's
That's awesome.
definitely a good idea.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, cool. I mean, so maybe we'll kind of bring it to a close.
Sure, yeah.
Just I mean, it's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. But if you were going to kind of look to past you back in the distant past, who was just getting started, what would you say to do, and what would you say not to do?
Okay, I'm gonna have to think for a second.
Please take your time.
Um, yeah, I think things to say I would do. I would, yeah, I think doing game jams and stuff like that are really important. I know not everyone's into them, but I'm, I, I think, yeah, game jams are super important to sort of finishing something and making a game over the course of like 2 days or whatever, because then you can say like, look, I've finished this game, even though it's small and tiny and stuff. You finished something that's really exciting. Um, so I think I would say yeah, do lots of game jams. Just yeah, keep participating in those things. The other thing I would say is like um, don't try to solve all the problems in your game before you make it. Like, don't try to plan out the entire thing and like learn about every single thing you might run into. I would just say like figure out an idea, like get happy with your idea, and then just start making it, and then overcome barriers as you hit them. So don't try
Mm,
to figure out all the barriers beforehand and then solve them before you make anything. Like, just start making something. Because if you try to solve all the problems before you start making anything, then you're never gonna actually make anything.
yeah,
And I guess I've met a few people who sort of like are always like, oh, I need to figure out this thing or solve this thing or do this thing before I can start making it. And it's like, no, you just start making it, and then as you hit um, obstacles and as you run into problems, fix those one by one as you progress through the game, and that way you'll actually be working on something and finishing something. So I think that those are the probably the two biggest things I would say to do. Um, and also just find like-minded people who like making stuff too. Like just surrounding yourself with other creative people is really important. So you have people to talk to, so you're not going crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then things not to do. Um, hmm. I think overscoping is probably like you said earlier, overscoping probably. But I mean, I think that's part of the learning experience too. If you overscope, then you'll learn slowly about what you can handle, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Things not to do. Yeah, I'm not sure about things not to do.
Well, I think actually the thing that you just said about not trying to pre-solve problems is a that really rings true to me, because I, having not made stuff, I was like trying to write all this stuff down and like having all these ideas and like I'm going to do this and then it's going to work like this and this is going to, and then you actually I was just like working on this prototype thing where the camera was like doing all this crazy rotation, and I like played it for like 10 minutes and got super nauseous.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
like building a whole thing. Like if I had like spent a bunch of time planning all these other mechanics that were gonna go off this rotating camera, like they would have been in the garbage, because like that just didn't work. Like it seemed good. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be disorienting, and I was like, I want to throw up. Like,
I totally been there too. Definitely. I never write game design documents. I'll write, maybe if I'm sharing the idea with the people, I'll write a paragraph or two. But this is kind of the general idea. Let's just run with this from here, and then I'll just start prototyping it, because I've found the same thing where if you start planning out too much, a bunch of it won't work, and then you just planned a bunch of stuff for nothing. Or if you're trying to solve problems, like learn different tools and things before you actually need them, then there's no, like, you don't know if you're even going to need them yet. So it seems better just to kind of start working on things, and then as you run into stuff, solve those, versus trying to plan it all beforehand. But
yeah, no, I think that's super awesome, and I feel like a lot of the time, I mean, that's a cool piece of advice, because that actually that rings true to me and runs counter to a lot of the advice that's given to people who are at that very early stage. They're like, oh, well, you got to write a game design document. It's got to be 14 pages long with all these numbers in it, and it's like, well, you don't know anything about design, so whatever you're going to write is going to be all fucked up anyway, So it's like giving people that advice is actually terrible, because then you see these people who are like, I don't know how to program anything, but I've got this 14-page game design document, and we're going to have this level up system and and then this is, and it's just like, bro, it's like, not to mention, like, I feel like trying to write a 14-page design document just makes you overscope instantly.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Yeah, it definitely, you're trying to fill the pages with stuff, and you kind of run off on crazy tangents and things like that. Definitely.
Yeah, it's going to have an inventory system, and it's going to do this, and
For a while, I remember when I was making games when I was a little bit younger, and Game Maker and stuff, and I was reading about other people who were, always saying you need game design documents. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna write a game design document, and I think it was for a game I'd already started, so I had a bit of an idea, and I got like, I don't know, 2 pages in, and it's like I don't even know what to write anymore, because I don't know, maybe it felt like really pushing it. Like I was like, well, you're gonna do these things, and there's gonna be this stuff, but I don't even know until I start programming it. I don't even know how it's gonna feel and stuff. So it just seems to make more sense to kind of just prototype, especially like maybe once you're, have a better idea of what you want to make and things like that, you can kind of like plan out a bit more because you've had more experience. But when you're starting, like, I would just start prototyping stuff. Don't spend forever planning it, because then it just doesn't usually work. At least for me. But
no, I have that experience too. Where it's like I wrote all this stuff, and then I didn't use like 80% of it, and then you also realize you're like, oh, these mechanics don't work. It's going to get super complicated, and I think that I think prototype over a game design document, and just finding like 1 or 2 like mechanics that feel good in a prototype that you're like, oh yeah, click back and forth on this a lot, and then you're like, okay, and then you could kind of flesh something out more. I think that's actually really, really smart.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Best of luck on Skytorn and your other projects. And thank you. And if people want to connect with you online, where should they look for you?
Probably the fastest way is Twitter. So it's at NoelFB. That's probably the fastest way. I mean, I guess you could email me to denberry@gmail.com, or my website, I guess, is noelberry.ca. My games and things like that. But yeah, thanks. This was a lot of fun, and good luck on your projects too.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up there, and talk soon.
Okay. Thanks. Later.
Later.